Joining us now, Rob Sigler, opinion contributor, SuperTalk Mississippi News. Rob, good to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet. So you just published an article, SuperTalk Mississippi News. You authored one entitled, "It's Time to Address Gun Violence in Mississippi." What's the message here, Rob?
Well, the message is that once was a big city issue has now become a Mississippi issue and has continued to grow as a problem in communities throughout our state, in my opinion. And I think we need to address this issue that we've here in Mississippi, for the most part, have not necessarily ignored, but have not taken as serious. When you look at some of the issues that take place in rural communities throughout our state, particularly involving our youth, I think that needs to be addressed.
Right. And you're right. It seems like that to a great extent we see these reports on the national media about these situations, these situations of reports of gun violence, I should say, in other areas outside of our state. And we tend to think that sort of stuff just doesn't happen here, but there seems to have been an uptick. And what's most disturbing to me, Rob, is that we're seeing teenagers and young people are
Exactly.
both the perpetrators and the victims here.
Right. And you're exactly right. When you see the type of gun violence that takes place in, for example, just recently in Lexington, Mississippi,
Right.
where teenagers were in a parking lot and using AR-15 style weapons. I mean, that's an issue, and that's an issue for all of us. That's not just an issue in Jackson. It's not an issue in down here on the coast where I'm at. That's an issue for our entire state. And I think as a state, as individuals, we need to address this problem and let our young people know that there are consequences to your actions. And I think that's where the issue really lies is at home, in the schools. It's not a legislative issue. It's not a political issue. It's not a Democrat Republican issue. It's an issue within our families. And we need to get those morals and values back to where they used to be when I was a teenager.
Yeah. So, the first thing that comes to mind, and I certainly agree with you, is in not trying to be, I guess, confrontational, but what families? That's the fundamental problem, is what
Right.
families? When you think about the number of kids in the state and our country that are born into fatherless homes, that live in fatherless homes, that are born to teenagers, this is, to me, got to be a major contributing factor to the uptick of violence and just other social issues.
I totally agree with you. And it's up to our communities, our advocates for our youth to do something about it. I commend places like Vicksburg, where I was once the editor of the paper there. Mayor George Flaggs has taken the initiative in trying to do something about curbing um, crime and violence with our youth within their community. And hopefully they can get something going, and maybe it can be an example for the rest of the state.
Well, as you know, you can't legislate morality. You certainly can't legislate the traditional nuclear family. But what can we do? I just feel so helpless on this. I feel like I want to help, but I'm not sure what I can do. I can't serve as a father in these homes, and I don't think any message coming from a person like me on what kind of risk and danger and problems and responsibilities are associated with being a parent to try to deter some of this. What can we do?
That's a good question. I wish I had that answer also. I think it's up to people within our communities, our elected officials, to come up with some of those answers, to have something for our youth to do. You know, many schools have, athletic activities, things of that nature. And I commend there's a ton of teachers and coaches and people like that who have the best interests of our children in mind. But there's not enough of them. And I think it's up to all of us to try to come up with that answer to determine what we can do to help our youth become better citizens, because an issue like this is just not something that affects the few folks. If it affects everything, it affects our economy, it affects tourism, it affects everything. Every aspect of our lives is affected by gun violence, in particular, crime and gun violence with our youth.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we're seeing more flight out of our capital city, not just
Right.
residents, but now we're starting to see more of an exodus of businesses, which is the exact opposite of what the capital city needs. It needs the tax base. It needs
Exactly.
it needs quality businesses to keep the good quality traffic flowing into the city. And this flight, it just seems to be ignored by city leaders, and they don't seem to take it seriously. And the
I,
legislature
I,
tries to step in. So, what do you think about that?
I totally agree with you. They need to find methods that'll help in curbing that violence and keeping those jobs and those businesses in Jackson and within the surrounding areas of Jackson as well. Um, but it's going to take everyone to do it. It's not just going to be one person or elected officials to do it. It's going to take communities to do this.
I think there's kind of a prevailing attitude across the state, Rob, and get your thoughts on this, that, well, it's just Jackson. They don't know what they're doing. Let it
Hmm.
die. But the fact is, it's a capital city, and it's also houses our airport, our major airport in the state, and that pulls in a lot of visitors. And if they're doing business around the metro area, quite often they've got to travel through the city. That doesn't put forth necessarily the best impression. I've personally dealt with that in my business career, having people come in from all over the country, and you almost feel like you've got to sort of make excuses for it, and this shouldn't be that way.
Right. It shouldn't be that way at all. Your capital city should be a shining light for the entire state. And people need to realize that this is an important aspect of Mississippi, is that the city of Jackson be that shining light for the rest of us to be proud of. And we should get behind any efforts to help curb the violence and crime that takes place in Jackson. And even down here on the coast, people on the coast need to do the same thing. They need to realize that Jackson's a vital, important piece of our state, and it's not just a Jackson issue; it's a state issue.
Anything legislatively from our state elected officials you'd like to see happen, Rob?
I think they should be more involved in community development type stuff for children, for our youth to be involved in, promote more um, extracurricular activities to help our kids have something to do. Because a lot of this, is like you say, is fatherless homes, but it's also, kids and teenagers don't have as much to do
Yeah.
in their communities, and so they find whatever is easiest to do, and oftentimes that's crime and gun
Fills the
violence.
void.
So
Just fills the void.
exactly,
There,
exactly,
we've all been through that phase of our life. You're always looking for the next thing. What's the next
right.
good time? And so often now, this is just kind of crime seems to pique their interest. They get pressured by their peers, and off they go.
Exactly. And when I was a kid in high school, I went to Harrison Central down here on the coast in the 80s, and it didn't seem like there was this issue of crime among my peers at that time. So,
Right.
um, you know, it's something's got to change, and hopefully it'll be changing sooner than later.
Rob, it's a great piece you wrote at SuperTalk Mississippi News, and appreciate you joining us
Thanks.
here on Middays today. Take care. Thank you.
My pleasure. Take care.
We're coming right back in the Element Wealth Studios with more of Middays. Please stay with us.